Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. I wanted to speak about a concept which I am really passionate about, a concept where, as a human being, I have decided to dedicate my life to. And I wanted to share with the audience how I am perceiving a sort of way to value human life before we transition as a temporary being. In some sense, I'm a person implementing a strategy and approach, and I want to share that approach. I have summarized, or I have put that approach into the sentence, honorably serving the mind of the civilization. And in the subtitle, I've written Future Visions. Now, what the future is really is, it is vision. The future is, in some sense, how our eyes walk. So, in order for me to explain this perspective of how a human being can serve the mind of their civilization, for audience members that are new, I need to explain the mind-body substance dualism, which was a contribution to philosophy from René Descartes. And then I will share you how I have, in some sense, established that mind-body dualism. So in some sense, René Descartes was a person, just to quickly wrap this up, René Descartes was this person who, his approach to truth was, in some sense, oh my God, his approach to truth was to close his Facebook. Jesus Christ. Sorry for the interruption if the audience heard the sound. But anyways, René Descartes talks about the mind-body dualism. Pretty much he was a person who was doubting everything. His strategy is like, I'm going to find truth, I'm going to doubt everything. So as he doubts everything, he realizes he can't doubt the doubter. And there's a dimension of perception in which there is something seeing something or something doing something, and then when this something that is doing something is wondering how it's doing something, or I shouldn't say how, or what is the doer, or who is the doer, or who is the seer, pretty much René Descartes realized the doubter cannot be doubted. The one asking the question, the one questioning reality, the questioner can't be questioned. And therefore there needs to be a sort of consciousness before there is anything to that consciousness. And in René Descartes' mind-body dualism, the mind is seen, you can say, as its own dimension, the body is seen as its own dimension, rather than us feeling it's just one thing. That's why there's a dash between the mind and the body, you know? You know what it is, it's kind of like, it's like one word you can even say. We have a mind, we have a body, we have a mind-body. So anyways, René Descartes kind of, in human thought, shared this idea that there is, the mind is in its own room and the body is in its own room. Now, I personally, even before being acquainted to Descartes, had a sort of awareness to my imagination as being a sort of room. But I had never conceptualized it as a realm. So what I call it, you could say Mr.Within's version of the mind-body dualism is, I don't know, let's call it Mr.Within's inner realm and outer realmism. Right, for me, there is reality, but this reality has two types of textures. It has a very objective texture, which is like right now it's my physical body in my moment. It's physical, sensation-oriented. The same way I can touch a table, I can touch, my body. But when it comes to the texture of thought, the subjective reality, for me, pretty much the mind is a world. That's how I'm acknowledging it. So anybody hearing me here, I'm treating imagination. That means anybody who has a wild imagination, they're like a double-sided antenna where the antenna in some sense receives objective signals, and then the sensory perception translates into a subjective signal, but I also feel we can receive from the inner realms as well. You know what it is? It's like the outline, or I'll say it like this. It's I shared this last night. This is a sort of perfect metaphor I would perceive for the role of intelligence. So it's kind of like the world is the canvas, space is the canvas, the body or the sensory perception is like the ink, and the pen that is writing it is the free will. And what is moving the pen? That means just whoever you are, just write something down on a piece of paper or just make scribbly lines. You know, it's as if like, what is moving? You know, what is moving our conscious response to phenomenology. Or if you were to consider inner realm phenomenology, the term for that, Immanuel Kant, this philosopher, established, he calls it noumenology, noumenon. So what happens in front of your eyes to Immanuel Kant was phenomenology, and what happens behind your eyes was to noumenology, right? I call it the inner realm, because for me, it's like the inner realm is very different. The way our minds are being real to us is very different than how our body is being real to us. It's kind of like our body is moving in a giant spotlight of attention, which we call mind. And that spotlight of attention seems to be sort of spherically emerging from the center of the brain, right? I mean, of course, it's kind of like, I can't tell you how many moments for me a spiritual experience just constituted in realizing I am a sort of attributeless observer, and the moment goes on and the world goes on, and it's as if like, what promise can a changing existence give you, a changing existential reality? It's like, you know, the outer realms, it is just change, but in the inner realms we can watch the change, and that watcher doesn't change. And there is this component to human nature, you know. There's a story I often share from this one of my favorite, and one of what I would consider, if I'll try to read his quotes today, his poetry, but his name is Attar of Nishapur. And Attar of Nishapur is this really next level human being and poet, where he shares this story that there was a man who was digging graves. Just to share with you the depth of this man's kind of poetry. In his poetry, he's kind of like relaying his story, but in his own way. So what he says is that there was this gravedigger back in the day, imagine 700 years ago. So this gravedigger, imagine for the most of his life, imagine being a gravedigger for like 40 years or something, right? For most of his life, every day this person has seen, you know, the outer people exit their outer realms and whatnot, you know. And he's been the last one to put the dirt of the world, you know, over the eyes of the, you know, the soul that has moved past its form. But anyways, there's no ideal soul yet. Pretty much the story is there's this gravedigger, okay? And this person works in this graveyard. One day somebody comes up to him, you know, a younger person comes up to him and says, hey man, you've been digging graves here for like 40 years, you know? And so what's the shocking thing, the most shocking thing you've seen? And guys, 700 years ago, the world was open to multidimensional context. It's hilarious. You know, it's as if our minds, the moment we had minds, these minds went everywhere, right? And so it was as if like multidimensionality was a singular access back in the day, but now it has become fragmented through time. Anyways, the person asks, hey, what's the most shocking thing you've seen in the graveyard? And this is the answer of the Gravedigger, which is very metaphysical. The Gravedigger says the most and Attar, this poet is sharing the story, and the Gravedigger says, all these years I have seen people change, people come and go, human beings, living a life and dying, and I'm there at their finish line, kind of, and he's saying this, that every day he's been noticing change, but strangely, every time he's cleaning the graveyard or doing his work in the world, there seems to be something in him watching the moment, watching his hand do the work and all this, that doesn't change. So he says the answer of the Gravedigger is pretty much that it's myself. There's something within his eyes that's unchanging this whole time he's been looking at change. So he's a person who's fascinated by the changeless in this story. Anyways, I would say, if we take this consideration that there is an observer or a viewer, there's a viewer and then there's the viewed, the observed, or there's an experiencer and then there's the experienced. The experienced, its management, I call serving the body of the civilization. When it comes to the inner realms, managing the inner realm, or when we focus on trying to do something as a species about the observer within, rather than the observed, which is the outer realm, it's as if we're serving the mind of civilization, and that's really the game of the intellect, The intellectuals in this world are not here to, shield themselves with egoic armor. But the intellectual community of the world is here to wonder about how human beings will go through the greatest transition ever recorded in history, where 8 billion beings and majority of human beings for a moment recognize that the mind is like a simultaneous film being played at the same time as the physical body is being played. But the physical body, the timing of this film is different. That means the speed of the outer realms is different than the speed of the inner realms, and in the inner realms it is so much faster, and the reason we can even experience the concept of something fast is only through a referential modality. That means only as fast, how fast you're going if you have a point of consideration in comparison to another point, right? And even I would say, from a scientific narrative, it would be as if, like, in life, everything has a speed, everything is moving in space. The moment the movement has a direction, it has velocity. And what I mean by this is that speed is like mindless and velocity is mindful. Poetically speaking, trying to take these terms to a psychological level, that really when there is direction to something, the speed has meaning. So if you're a person in this world and life is just going forth, of course, if we don't direct it, it's meaningless. We have to be, at least the director, and think of it like a film, actually creating a film. You got to be like the producer, director, and actor of your own life. So, through this distinction of the observed, let me start from here, the observed and the observer. The observer is the destiny of our minds on this earth, and I use the word destiny as in just the outcome, or what the unknown outcome of our intelligence would be. So the destiny of the observer or I'll start from the observed. The destiny of the observed, I have concluded. Literally anybody on this planet can argue with me, is free to challenge me. As long as I'm here in this world, anybody's welcome to challenge me, in the sense that I am a person concluding a bit of a maverick of our time, suggesting that in the outer realms, the purpose of life will inevitably be the advanced civilization. I'm that guy saying that at the end of every human being's thinking or process of trying to articulate the world, they will conclude the destiny, the best destiny of an object is its advanced expression in the opportunity of its consciousness before it changes. Because change has been in the room before us. Before I was born, the world was changing, you know? And we so easily accept that, our temporary nature. The destiny of the outer realms, or I would say, let me word it better even, the best strategy as a temporary being to the continuity of the human idea is the advanced civilization. We will get there eventually. It just depends. It's all about how much we care now. So anyways, outer realms, advanced civilization. In the inner realms, advanced communication. And you can say this is where I am implementing something I think never done before. I think I'm that person who is, and I'm not saying this with a sort of egotistical attachment, guys. I'm just sharing it as an observance of what I have done. I feel I have, through my communication in this project, if this project gets big, right now this project is like a satellite just entering our universe from a different universe, poetically speaking. But it's like Mr.Within is trying to get the theistic audiences of the world to advance communication, and in some sense the atheistic audiences of the world to advance civilization. That means I've explained to you the best strategy in front of our eyes, which is to build an advanced civilization, and Civilization 2.0 is my really detailed strategy for this. Pretty much interstellar dreams. I'll go to the inner realms. In the inner realms, the strategy is really to figure out what we are, and the moment we figure out what we are, we can have a control over our meaning. And that's the complex thing, because right now children are going to school, children are entering the educational system, and the teacher's like, be quiet, kid, I'm teaching, quiet your minds, kids, settle your minds. I mean, I don't think teachers, a lot of teachers say that, but pretty much the idea is there, that it's like we are telling the child in the educational system to pay attention, but we as a species have no clue what is actually going on with our minds, right? And out of all the archetypes presentable here, for me, the antenna archetype has been the most healthiest. Why? Because it in some sense keeps technology alive, but at the same important, gives us a way to connect to technology as an archetype, but at the same time, and it's not just like a mechanical antenna, I mean like we are here to explore the unknown as the known. So the purpose of all knowledge, all knowing, anybody who wants to know something, the whole purpose of this is to meet the edge of the known, which I have termed the language threshold, and then the unknown recalibrates the knowledge. So what I'm trying to say is like there's so many people thinking like, oh man, how many years do I have to go meditate in a cave, And what length of a beard do I need to grow to become enlightened and wise, you know? Like, like, you know, people are thinking like that nowadays, but it would surprise people how easy it is that by slowing down the psychological desire for the moment having to be exactly like the past, the person finds themselves in a neutral state. That neutral state is the most divine state of mind. That means, who knew? We thought divinity had to be good, you know, or it had to fight bad, but really what it is just it's just sight in emptiness ultimately. And it's like, you know, the person, what is the term? It's like the person's crown chakra opened like a tulip rather than a lotus, you know. Like, that's the sort of enlightenment of the neutral, awareness to the neutrality of the realm. You know, imagine extraterrestrials come down to Earth in the future. This is a hypothetical setting, guys, humorous hypothetical setting. Imagine extraterrestrials come to Earth, you know, and they're like, what are you, human beings? What are you? And imagine there's a yogi in like that neutral samadhi state, you know, and the yogi's like, we are whatever you perceive, man. I mean, like, that's how brains work, you know. They create their own universes, and through engagement with the outer realms, we climb out of our past exposure to imagery. So you can say change is enlightening the past. So we serve the body of the civilization by, in some sense, building the advanced civilization. The advanced civilization is the idea that if human beings can make more backup systems than mistakes, they will succeed. Because the backup system will make sure a mistake doesn't become a mistake. So if we are 8 billion human beings right now, if 8 billion of us started to invent, literally we were like, oh my god, the future wants us to all be inventors, you know. And so imagine we have the inventive spirit find us, and let's say the inventive spirit finds you. It could be like you actually are someone inventing something. It could be you. The whole idea is the inventive vision is this exploration in the inner realms. That means you would say what we call an explorer in the outer realms. In the inner realms is our eyes can be explored just like a portal can be entered from two different universes. That's all I'm saying. Our inner universe is there. It's there as our presence, as our attention. I would say behind your eyes we are a creature of attention. In front of your eyes you are a creature based on what's in the attention. You know, and so you can think of it this way, that the ultimate object, you know, this is a sort of philosophical claim I make, an ontological claim about how the nature of existence is the greatest object is the advanced civilization. That means the greatest thing that can happen in the materialistic, in the physical, this physical universality, this physical universe we're in right now, the greatest thing that can happen is movement of matter in a way where it has never been before, and at the same time has expanded in a way that has been never before. Because what it is, it's like I remember David Lynch giving this perfect metaphor, where David Lynch, he practices transcendental meditation, and he says, if you have like a golf ball sized consciousness, you receive that much. You know, you receive as much as a golf ball from the world around you. If you have a bowling ball consciousness, you in some sense receive as much as that, right? And if you have a universal consciousness, you receive as much as your consciousness can handle. Right? So there is no such thing as knowledge. There's just antennas that realign themselves and receive the realm differently. And this is so important. I am telling you, like this whole time, these couple of years I've been giving these talks, that's all I'm trying to say. That there is something unknown going on with intelligence, and it seems not to be too much based on what the past was. I mean, the interpretation of the signal as an antenna is, but like right now as I'm talking, like even I'm talking, like my eyes, everything is receiving perception. It's as if the purpose of existence was to perceive itself. Who knew? Who knew that was like as mysterious as, you know, the laws of nature, you know? And people, you know, sometimes I wonder, like scientists are feeling, you know, I totally feel, you know, how scientists feel nowadays, you know? They feel like nobody cares for the deeper mysteries of the universe. The deeper mysteries of, I would at least say, the outer realms, right? But I'm a person who's like on the other side, and I'm like, oh, you know, people don't care about the deeper mysteries of the inner realm. You know, the scientist wants to see the edge of the outer world, and the philosopher wants to see the edge of the inner world. And both are attempts at trying to find the edge of the sky of consciousness. Philosophers bring great questions to the human tribe, and the scientific mind, scientists bring great answers. I think that would be the task. The scientist there is there to double check the answer, and the philosopher is there to double check the question. There is this interesting Japanese comic book, which they've adapted it to a show called To Your Eternity. And this narrative, this show had such an incredible storyline, and it relates to what I'm saying here. In the storyline, there was an immortal object. An immortal object was by some creative higher power. This is how the story begins. Thrown into the world, and the creative higher power that has created this immortal object is narrating the continuity of this immortal object in the human world. And this immortal object falls down, and the moment it contacts Earth, this is all in the show, right? The moment the object falls down, it identifies with the ground, with the earth, so it becomes a stone. Then there is moss on the stone, it identifies with the moss. Then a wounded wolf kind of falls onto the moss, on that specific moss where the immortal object was there, and then the immortal object from a rock suddenly transforms into the wolf. Exact replica of the wolf. Then this wolf goes and meets a human being in the storyline, and the human being dies, and he ends up becoming that human being. And then they meet this, like, I don't know, mythological creature in the forest or something, and he becomes that. And the whole idea is that as information is exposed through direct experience, the nature of the movement of the consciousness realigns, or can realign. So it's another way of saying, like, wondering about if you are one person this whole life, or you have in every moment of your consciousness of information in the world, it has been a room of its own. That means who I was yesterday technically can be seen as a completely different being than who I am being today. Not in the sense of just the narrative or how we use name and form to identify. I mean in the sense that the way my energetic experiential awareness of my own existence was yesterday is completely different to how it is now. So when it comes to, I would say, advancing, serving the mind of the civilization, let me take it here. And the whole point of me sharing that Japanese story about the immortal object was how the new chain updates us. And it's like honestly, like how many, you know how there's so many iTunes updates, it's kind of like that. It's as if the mind is a sort of software, and the software has access to the internet, and the software can update instantly. And we're like a biological hardware with a subjective software, internal software, and this subjective internal software is connected to, you can say, the web of life. In one book I called it the web of Enos. Maybe I'll read it later, but the first book I ever wrote, the last chapter of the book is the most important, I would say. The advancement of communication means that if you were to consider yourself the communication of the universal sector right now, that means if a person had some sort of ability somehow to for a moment realize they are happening alongside the whole universe, and there is a singular instantaneous moment where universe and man, or man in the universe, there's no difference. You see, that's true universality, but our species is not culturally conditioned to be able to even access universal archetypes. We can't even access galactic archetypes. If an alien lands on Earth in the future, everybody's going to freak out on the aliens like, yo guys, I just came here to talk, right? So I'm just being very playful that the species has to have a maturity in grounding itself in the true nature of the presence, the witnessing presence of the being. You see, truth, the more we go back in time, had no choice other than to be experiential. Then when language developed, truth began being confused or forgotten in simulations. And these simulations of meaning, when you can instantly awaken from them. What that means is like everybody is like a great human being in history. It's just that only if they can realize it, only if they can care for what has happened now, because the inner realms can, the inner realms, the inner realms can possess the outer realms, or the outer realms can possess the inner realms. If you shackle the human being to a behavior, to a repetitive behavior without the consciousness of the being able to make decisions, what ends up happening is that the human being stops being a human to itself, right? And the main goal of trying to get rid of suffering on the planet is to have more stable pilots in the realm. That's all I want to see. To me, every person is an unknown intelligent point in the space-time continuum, and people are comparing themselves, I want to see a civilization so advanced that if there was any sort of extraterrestrial land on this earth, if the extraterrestrial, I want to see an advanced civilization prepared for internal extraterrestrial invasion if that happens in the future. I want to see the species so advanced when it comes to its mind. You know what that means? It's kind of like the person has a desire to be a parent in this world, but then the parent is like, where am I bringing the child to? What kind of world, have I made for my future echo? And I'll be honest, the type of world we have built is not safe for this concept of children we have, right? Because there's levels of suffering, and there isn't balance. So that means there's some beings on the planet. It's hilarious. It's like in the East or in poorer countries, there is, I would say it this way, let me is geographical. So in poorer countries, human beings, their outer realms suffer more than their inner realms, and in some sense, in richer countries, the person's inner realms suffer more than the outer realms. Hence why yoga has managed to stay in the West. People don't realize there was a point in human history, I think it started in the 1950s onwards, I could be wrong here, but so many yogis from India came to the West to share the complexity of their inner realities. Swami Vivekananda, Swami Shivananda, Shri Prabhupada, just endless, just people who were experiencing just their outer realms had attained a sort of, sophistication, and so in their inner realms they had perceived something very complex, and they in some sense saw how the language of Western civilization, it's not that it's good or bad, it's like there's some languages that are multidimensional, there's some languages that are obsessed in being singular image oriented. This world is interconnected. This world has no choice because of existence's singular nature. Everything's connected, it's like we all have our existence in common, Nobody can go to another person and be like, yo, I exist more than you. We all equally exist, But somebody can go to another person and say, hey, I'm experiencing something you're not, or what are you experiencing that I'm not? For me, guys, I was born in 1991, and I would say from 2011, where I noticed where I would say 2011 was the first time I stepped out of the linguistic simulation. It was one of the most divine experiences of my life. And sometimes I think if there were, a bunch of sentences I could write on my gravestone in the future, or I could have written on my gravestone, one of them would be, there is more than language here. As if sometimes I've had my kind of, in my inner realms, I have not only in dream states experienced my own death, but I have sometimes simulated, kind of inevitable scenarios of my own existences. That means, imagine the brain is creating probabilities. So the person, let's say there's a person walking in a park, okay, and the brain is like looks at a tree, and then the concept of the tree branches out literally in your inner realms, and so there comes suddenly 3 probabilities. I can climb this tree, I could walk past this tree, I could take a picture of this tree. So the brain is throwing out like its ideas, the brain is just freaking out, So the brain generates internally probabilities. Now, some of these probabilities, it's kind of like how gods in ancient times, like there were statues of gods, and I personally wondered, I'm like, why does this god have 3 faces? Like, why does this statue of this specific god have 3 faces? I'm like, did they do that so everybody from every angle could see the god archetype? Like, was it a work of art, or was there something more to it? Then in Vedic thought, I got the answer, where really the gods, the statues, any statue you see in human history where the statue has multiple heads, it means the mind of that intelligence is in multiple dimensions. So when we see, for example, a God with three faces, that's another way of saying that God doesn't have three faces. That's one being who is present in three dimensions at once. Right? And I would say really in Tibetan Buddhism, you notice this, that there are figures like Guru Padmasambhava where they manifest as the absolute because they're done with time. They have dealt with time you could say poetically, they're in previous universes. Because time is not a big deal. Literally, it's just like a window that we choose to keep open or close. Some people see time as a window of opportunity, and some people see time as a window to get outside of the simulation. The mind of man is like a universe in motion. There's no better term for the mind than the inner realm. I hope to see the day where when somebody says inner realm, like that, like mind has become an outdated word, to be honest. Mind, even the soul is like the concept, the word becomes outdated, right? But eventually it's just those words are there to keep alive an unknown universe to our psychology. The moment we have the audacity to find, to care for the light that in some sense shines or calls towards us in the unknown forest, right? I'm looking at this wallpaper and I'm like, I'd definitely go for a walk in this park, It's like, is that a golden afterlife, a possibility in the background? I'll definitely go for a walk in the park. To also add a very personal dimension to this episode, honor is like how the universe is victorious and you're abiding by it. It's like an instantaneous victory. And what honor means is that the sum total of perception comes to an honest conclusion of everything. So what that means is like the brain is like a couple pound flesh in a jar. It's like a neurochemical, projector. So based on its greatest ability to project, it holds the universe. That means you can say honor is like another way of saying a person wonders about the greatest possibility of the intelligence, and then abides in accordance to that. That means stays true to the possibility that they have in some sense accessed in their inner realms. By the way, viewers are welcome to ask questions, challenge me, or in some sense, pretty much I'm looking at life as a designer and I'm commenting on a design I'm seeing. Anybody's welcome to share or try to share angles that they think I am not seeing. The chat section exists for the purpose we give it. For me, being alive is a privilege, and it is, it is an opportunity, but it's in some sense like if you lived as a body, it is just a life based on motion. So if you want to succeed as a physical body, you have to somehow figure out movement. I was even telling, okay, I won't mention who it is, but I was telling someone that even if a person in some sense doesn't have mobility in moving their body, they can still, move the muscles, because the muscles are kind of like on-off switches, right? And when you imagine when you hit the on-off switch, right? So the muscle begins tearing, right? So what happens to a light bulb, in a room when you keep turning on and off the switch, something happens, if the fuse goes out, and in some sense the light bulb stops, it reaches its breaking point pretty much. So repetition causes breaking point, causes us to reach the breaking point of whatever it is we're repeating, and in some sense we call that mastery. Mastery is in some sense a person looking at something and trying to look at all the angles to it, And if a person wants to master the piano, they have to literally play the piano every day. They have to be up at least in my view, they have to care to figure out how far they can go with the technology they have access to, right? And when I say how far, I don't mean careless, right? Because there's a way to walk into the palace of the future, poetically, where we are walking gently, gracefully, and with an honor of how we have walked so far. We are carrying the value of our eyes so far in regards to how they have dwelled. And then there's a way of entering the palace of the future where we're stumbling and we're rolling over the royal rug and all this, it's like we can't, hold our balance, It's like we don't want to enter the future that way. We want a generation of very advanced human beings. And as poetically, Commander Erwin Smith, this fictional character, this fictional character from this show called Shingeki no Kyojin, he says, life is not meaningless. We live for those who will find the meaning someday. That means even if it's meaningless, let's say it is for you meaningless. Let's say you're someone right now and you're like, holy shit, this is meaningless. Everything I've been looking at so far is meaningless. Oh my God. Let's say there's an existential panic. Okay, and let me tell you the cool thing. Our response to that meaninglessness is our meaning. And our response is to try to get the future as far as possible. That's my whole vision. That's why I'm so, max out whatever, how far systems can go attitude. Right? Because I want to quickly get to a state where we don't have to worry about violence and fucked up shit happening in our outer realms. We can have an era of incredible internal communication open up to the species, and through archetypes of, I would say, at least at minimum a planetary nature, at peak a universal nature. So we're changing the spectrum of intelligence rather than locking ourselves in an idea of the human being and then relating all our intelligence to that idea. You see, I am saying something that a quantum physicist, when asked what quantum physics is, said. And the quantum physicist said, hey man, it's like we're like getting a lion from its natural environment, putting it in a cage, then doing experiment. The experiment is like looking at that cage lion and being like, yeah, this is what a lion is. You cannot disconnect the natural context with the natural concept. Anytime we do this, we suffer, and that's how the war with the machines begin. Right? Because if there's a war with machines in the future, all that the machine, or let's say poetically or intensely, what the AI, robot leader in the future would say, human beings, you created me, you have to accept me. And so there comes that complexity where it is how we evoke the future. If you are a graceful human being, and you're a parent, let's say you're a single mother or a single father, right? If you're just a graceful human being, you allow human beings who witness the graceful archetype enter the world. Do you see? If you act kindly, that image communicates. Now, in the educational system, the psychology of the child is like a sponge of all the other moments in life they find themselves in outside of the school. Do you see? So really, it's like on some level, sure, we're human beings, taking notes on knowledge. But on another level, we are just a spherical space, excuse me, where the center of our attention is like a vacuum pulling everything towards it. That means it's like very hard to say if gravity is really just, the vacuum not making it easy for us, you know what I mean? Right now, we are at the third phase of this evolutionary model, three out of fourth phase, and of our evolution, where we went from an unconscious world. There were no creatures, nothing here. There was just a planet. Then there came an unconscious self. Suddenly creaturehood began, and creaturehood means a part of the earth began becoming separate from the earth and began moving and engaging the earth. So before we were on the earth, we were the earth. That's what I'm saying. So first phase, unconscious world, we go to the unconscious self. This is a creature that doesn't have a mind yet. This is pretty much all the other animals. They're at the second phase of consciousness. We have managed to come to the third phase. So in the second phase, it's just a mechanism happening. That means it's like if consciousness was leaping from different levels just like that to your eternity show, right? It's as if it's going from just being nothing to being something, and then being aware that it's something. And we are at that phase. We are at that phase of consciousness, model of consciousness that I've designed. So in some sense, from the unconscious world, UW, we go to US, unconscious self. From the unconscious self, through the miraculous ability to use language somehow, we get the clue that there was a sort of, importing, a sort of event that took place that made us be aware that language can be a side self. So we went to the conscious self. This is where we are now. In the future, we're going to go to the conscious world, but I predict that phase of evolution to be 3,600 years from now. The unconscious world means an era where we have lived so long as a human species, as a biological continuity, that all that is left is like we have served the mind of existence to such a degree where now it's as if we have been there, done that kind of ordeal. We evolve beyond the mental entity. And I would say those who are enlightened, they are using their mind as if they are in it. That as if right now, I would say I am like, just like we say a person, don't judge a book by its cover. A person's not just how they physically look, right? I'm saying don't even judge a mind by its cover, which is the idea of the person. We are not what we communicate. Our communication can never fully share the inner realms. At best, poetry can try to connect two dimensions in the inner realms. I honestly feel I am logged in to my embodiment. I don't feel I am my embodiment. I feel just like a video game. It's like the simulation doesn't exist when the person logs into the online video game. What happens is they go towards their user, how they had created their user before, their profile, right? Just like social media, right? Log in to the conscious waking state every morning, and every time we sleep we log out. Just by the nature of logging in and logging out, due to the multidimensional nature of reality, the narrative of death, it's not that we found a way to overcome death. We reached a sort of, you could say, view that death didn't make sense. That means death of a video game character is not the death of the player of the video game. Do you see what I mean? And imagine, your whole life you thought you're a character in an elemental video game, and suddenly at some moment while in the video game, your hand came off the let's say poetically, your soul for a second did not identify with the content of your mind. It's literally like the video, what do you call it? It's like the gamer's hand leaving the mouse and the keyboard, therefore a pure moment of soul, and that pure moment of soul is so beyond the idea of humanism and duality that I will tell you there's nothing to be afraid of, because nothing is the intelligent space where something is happening. And the mind is a quality. It's like, it's not something that can die. Quality is like an immortal notion. To me, colors are immortal internal objects. The vision of the future is how far we see now, and how far we allow the future to see, right? Because I know there's 100% human beings on this planet who have children, who bring children into this world, and they raise them as if to be the past rather than for what I see in the future. We will have such an advanced civilization that the advanced civilization will have a giant department of advanced communicators that are scouting talent. And talent for what? Talent for, as if, imagine our whole species was at war with time, and we had a limited sort of window to really truly understand the natural being before cyber interference. So we would seek natural human ability. Do you see what I mean? Daniel in the chat section says, do you feel the world can be seen as made up of 4 elements? I'm from the school of thought that accepts the 5th, because I consider all the elements to be the experienced and ether, the 5th element, to be the observer. And I think Plato had this notion too, where he was looking at a substance being, the ultimate truth. But I would say, sure, you can see the world made of 4 elements. You can see the world made of, how many elements are there in the periodic table? And the answer is as much as we have discovered so far. So there is, guys, I had such a bad chemistry teacher that right now, me looking into this is kind of like, it's from the kindness of my heart. I'll eventually share, probably a story about this chemistry teacher one day. But anyways, 118 elements, ladies and gentlemen. That's the number, 118. 118 can be said to be the divine number of 2021. You know what I mean? Now imagine, the chemist realizes there's other dimensions, and the chemist's like, you kidding me? I've been creating a periodic table only for one dimension? Oh, man. Excuse me. Guys, I've written something, for a moment right now. I just got a unique way to share something. I've written, what you evoke in the inner realms becomes the filter of your meaning. In reality, we are silent, attributeless observers. I'd say also roaming observers in such an unknown world that certainty is like a mirage. And that's the case, because when our self changes, the belief can't be the same. You know what I mean? That means it's not just an issue of, this is why it's so hilarious that there was religious war. Religions were fighting with one another in a sort of Hunger Games, It's silly because truth is literally in the religious text said that it is not a concept, and people are fighting over the conceptual validity of it. I would say belief could be, not belief, I mean that word has a heavy connotation, but I would say you're either worshipping language or you're directly experiencing life. There's two kinds, two ways to pilot. Either in and you could technically say a passenger is a pilot that is not piloting themselves, I've envisioned in the future that there will be a technology where there will be two layers. Imagine two airplanes inside one another, okay? And one airplane that's inside the other. This airplane, in some sense, imagine the airplane is crashing. This airplane uses the outer shell of the airplane as a jump off right before it hits the water. And then with parachutes, in some sense, it lands. And, I should probably be using way more specific terminology when it comes to this. But I don't know. I mean, the inner realms are active. The outer realms, we have no choice. It's just here. The outer realms is imagination. We didn't think. We didn't have to put energy to think, This is why if you're an observant person, you're getting information even without trying, Wherever you are for now in 2021, I would say serve. Or I would say, let's say right now human beings are already, let me assume that everybody's living for the advanced civilization. Let me for a moment assume, And if everybody was living for an advanced civilization, we'd be like, how are they living for it? And we'd see that those human beings who are trying to go at the frontiers of advancing the physical sciences, and those who in some sense go towards advancing the non-physical philosophies. We serve the mind of the species by contributing our unique perception, our unique DNA's gift of an angle of looking at things, and we share that with the civilization, and that becomes our the work of the advanced communicator in the lifetime, where you in some sense escort the efficiency through a collective compassionate context, the efficiency of your inner realms towards the outer realms. So what I'm trying to say is if you serve the mind of your civilization, you not only have to perceive an individual part of the spectrum, you don't have to even perceive a collective, you know. You have to even, I'm trying to say, a person can enter a state of mind where whatever they see, the mind can move quicker than the body, and that's what we have been calling imagination. Imagine mind and body again are like two dimensions. So imagine one dimension is you're moving in one dimension faster than another. So anytime the mind moves faster than the body, we are a mind. Anytime the body moves faster than the mind, we're a body. This is why language belongs to, consciousness, the domain of the mystery of consciousness. That means physics, hilariously, is a philosophical question. I would say science is a branch of philosophy, to be honest. And it was the case, right? Philosophy is way more ancient than science. Because philosophy, the questions came first before we had answers and methods. Imagine an advanced civilization in the future, those who have contributed to the mind of the species, they all in some sense get a sort of honor, get a medal of honor, right? Imagine we bring that into society, human beings in society based on their acts can get a medal of honor. And that, and imagine we create compassionate archetype based credit. Right? Where human beings, their selfish desires are met, but they are met while moving towards an efficient, context in the world. Imagine a yogi, a truth seeker asks, somebody who has access to the truth, asks the truth, show me God, and the person's like, I can't show you God, and the person's like, why? Why can't you show me God? And the person's like, because God's the one looking. And the person just stops in the lifetime for one moment and suddenly embraces their unknown nature. It just finds you guys, I'm telling you. It's very poetic. It's like in yogic thought. I mean, in this episode, my thoughts are all over the place. I'm conscious of that, but I'm saying the image behind the words in yogic thought. Truth was beyond humanism. Truth was a state where there was no reincarnation in Vedic thought, and Brahma Loka was God's level. That means imagine there's different dimensions, and these dimensions range from being closer to the dimension God is in. Okay? And imagine when you get to the dimension poetically, I mean it's not poetic. I mean, oh my God, I can't speak to you. When you find yourself in Brahma Loka, the final heaven, the seventh heaven in Vedic thought, Earth is the bottom of the mountain, of the 7 levels of the mountain. In Brahma Loka, one is actually living in the original Earth. And in the original Earth, there is no death. There is no reincarnation. When reincarnation stops, the spiritual person has fulfilled their destiny. That's like the sort of notion. And so what it is it's a spirit, like a raindrop, going through levels of experience where it joins other raindrops and becomes a stream. Different streams join and they become a river. Different rivers join and they in some sense become ready to go through a waterfall. The species goes through imagine a 90-degree turn, and in some sense another 90-degree turn. And eventually the waters find themselves to the ocean. So what it is our future is an oceanic, like mind-like state of living. Children will no longer be alone. Everybody will not just have friends, but the internal what right now our inner realms are separated. Like every person's walking in their own universe, even though they're in the same outer realm, right? But in the future, we're going to be able to walk into each other's inner realms as if like a person invites their friends into their imagination, pretty much. Like that's going to be possible. We're just like we have chat rooms, we're going to have imagination rooms. Imagine like you can have members to your mind. Right now, for example, those people who become members of this YouTube channel, this project, you're not only supporting like this channel in this lifetime, but at the same time, it's as if like you're getting access to how one human being's inner realms are taking place. Now, why does that have a value? Because every person is their own unique way. That means if you see how I'm playing the instrument, maybe whoever you are listening, you may hopefully find the curiosity to understand what kind of instrument your own intelligence is and master that, because we don't want a world where everybody is doing the same martial arts. We want a world where everybody's like their own martial art master. But in regards to the inner realms, because creativity cannot be colonized or cloned. It is like novelty will peak. Novelty will find a way when everything else doesn't. For me, a miracle is just something without a past reference. That means if a cup falls like from a table onto the ground, and the person's like, yo, I hope this cup doesn't break, and then they realize it's a paper cup. The person's like crying over a paper cup that fell to the ground, It's as if the moment you realize it's a paper cup, there is no suffering. So it's as if like we're treating our psychology like glass, but it's like paper cup all the way. Anyways, I was saying, it's like this whole project provides access to how at least one human being, one free will in the space-time, one moment of free will in the space-time continuum is piloting. In the future, if compassion is there, compassion cannot just alone help us, and I think the Dalai Lama noticed this based on the reaction he got to his teachings, right? That the world is too busy trying to be powerful and strong to itself to be compassionate. But compassion means multidimensional tolerance. That means we don't have to be able to only, like right now still it's so messed up that on the planet people are still like they haven't gotten over all the isms, like racism, sexism, all these isms are they're all there because we haven't realized we're all one species on a rock in the middle of nowhere. That's it. Right? And that's like, or in a yogic metaphor, they said it's like if something that you think is a snake is actually a rope. So if you treat the rope like a snake, you're afraid of the emptiness. But if you treat, the rope as the rope, you are liberated. Do you see? It's like we shouldn't think about freedom and make it that much of a big deal in the sense that like we're thinking of post-freedom era. I'm thinking of getting human beings to the most advanced level, then being like, okay, now what will human beings do? You know? It's as if like the unknown is this giant and the species is fighting it, you know? And I'm like, okay, what is the species fighting it? And we're fighting it with just sounds, you know? With loud noises and, you know, alpha power expressions. I mean, like, great, you know? You know, it's definitely, you know, probably 100% a lovely experience being, you know, the person with the biggest club in their hand, right? Or the person with the, you know, being the strongest person on the battlefield. I could totally understand the joy of that. But that's the warrior limited to just being a warrior on the physical dimension, right? To be a warrior in your inner realms means having the same attitude, you know, the same sort of honor in the outer and the inner, right? For me, it's like I have no choice other than to just be honored by my existence to do something for the future. Like, that's the only place where I can find honor, you know? The only thing that makes sense is just planting trees that we will not be, in some sense, sleeping under. So what I mean is that give as much as you can to the world that you are traveling in, that you have like you know, like an advanced consciousness entered this, you know, let's say earth plane. And so if you are an individual embodied human being, it's like the biggest clue. Why is objective reality here? For us to build something, for us to do something with it, right? This is why the yogic algorithm doesn't suffice, and I'm trying to fill that gap where it's like, how would wisdom in some sense approach the world? And wisdom will try to become aware of all the dimensions, then act. And when we go to become aware of all the dimensions, we recognize infinity. In the chat section, Daniel M says, Shunryu Suzuki says, a waterfall. The water does not come down as a stream, but is separated into many tiny streams. It must be very difficult experience for each drop to come down from so on. Wow, yeah, incredible use of the waterfall metaphor. You know, it's like, have you ever wanted to clap for someone's metaphor? You know. Honestly, guys, if we don't build an advanced civilization, what are we gonna do here then? You know, just run in the forest, you know, in our own ignorant simulation of peace, you know? There has to be something more. I understand gracefulness. People should go to the forest like how we charge a phone battery. But when we charge the phone battery, then the phone battery should be used, right? And human beings are living in this life wondering, what is my meaning? What is my meaning? And everyone's meaning is left to just how their free will not only receives information from the environment, but then manages that information. So believe it or not, there is internal management. And that's why you have free will, to be able to align the inner realms. You know, the mind is like a gift from the gods, and the gods were like, yo, did we really give human beings minds? Holy shit, you know. And all the gods were like, all right, let's watch this, you know, ancient mythology, you know, consider. You know. Can you imagine, there was a king, there was an emperor in Greece back in the day. This emperor orders his soldiers, like one day, I don't know, it rains on his daughter's wedding day or something, you know, and this emperor is like, Poseidon, you've done it now, you know, and he commands his empire and the army to go with swords and attack the ocean. So you see an army of the most like advanced soldiers being like, for the empire, and even their general is giving them a speech. It's like, soldiers, we're going at war with the gods. Get ready to attack the ocean with as much power you have. And it's just like an army hitting the ocean, you know what I mean? People with swords slamming the ocean. And imagine Poseidon, going up in the clouds, standing beside Zeus, and he's like, yo, bro, what are they doing? Truth doesn't care how we see it. Truth is what it is, right? That's the power of honesty. This is why honesty, like the difference between Vegeta and Goku and like that kind of narrative was like Goku was more honest. He was stupider than Vegeta, but he was more honest. Wow, man. This world of ours, it's karma is just how we put ourselves out there. And the best way to, relate to it is, I would say, the piloting metaphor. So I'm pretty much saying, if you're a person who wants to live as a mind, more as a mind than a body, so let's say there are inhibited human beings on this earth, all human beings that are inhibited still can serve the mind of civilization. Anybody at any state, by being able to share something of value from the inner realms, can serve the civilization, the mind of civilization. To serve the body of civilization, this is where children should be taught science without war. So what I mean is that it's like there's some science teachers who are like very gentle people. They go into the classroom and they're like, hello students, they write the topics on the chalkboard. It's like, all right students, write this down, and I hope all of you have read this. And then there are, imagine in the future, teachers who are like, hey, why is everybody in this classroom right now? And the teacher filters out the honest from the dishonest, those who actually care, right? And then the teacher, in some sense, performs. And what I mean by that is that the greatest teaching is to understand an event that is happening. And to be able to understand how intelligence is being a format, a life format, honor your world because you're in it once. That means it's like, there's some people who I would say they are street smart parkourists in the inner realm. They're jumping off different structures, or flying between structures. Imagine a bird flying between the branches of reality and a bird flying between the branches of knowledge. The bird is not any of the branches of knowledge. It watches it and it goes forth. Right, so the intelligence of man goes forth, and there is a force within every human being that will go in some sense on a colossal performance. You could say it is in some sense internally, you know what it is? We have to pick up our minds like a sword and a shield, and then at the end of the day gently put down the sword and shield, and then function as our presence. And the honor of life is really, you help what is going somewhere. What greater honor can there be? Imagine in the future, let's say another hypothetical scenario where extraterrestrials land, and imagine, let's say, an extraterrestrial fleet is in our sky, and we are too busy building an advanced civilization. Right? Just take this idea in. And the extraterrestrial comes to us and says, hey, human beings, don't you notice like we're about to invade your planet? We're extraterrestrials. And we human beings say, listen, buddy, we have realized the secrets of our energy. We have in some sense found such a universal mystery that we're trying to tackle that we don't have time to play, alien invasion games, And that, imagine the extraterrestrial being like, no way, these guys are too busy seeking the greater dimensions than to fight. Do you see? This is why warfare is the sign of a tormented being, really. That means if extraterrestrials are fighting us in the future, they're not enlightened at all. They're just internally tormented, where their egos have to externalize beyond the jurisdiction of others' freedom, right? Imagine something, I could totally see myself turning this into an epic script. And I think it's such a great idea. I might imagine there's an extraterrestrial that lands on Earth and says, in some sense, I'm going to invade Earth, right? And suddenly a time traveler lawyer from the future comes out of nowhere through a portal to that moment where an alien is intimidating the human species in invasion, right? And that time travel lawyer says, in some sense, due to galactic law, Earth cannot be touched. Do you see? And in some sense, the extraterrestrial invasion, it goes away, because in some sense, the eyes of the universe are big. You see, guys, the advanced is living behind our eyes. In front of our eyes, it's such a simple reality. It's super rectangular, gray, and tiresome. And this can only change from the input what we input into the system. So that means every person's life is like a quality or a type of information, or that goes, in some sense, the rivers join and they become the future of the species, right? Ruth in the chat section says, I may have said before, it's acknowledged by many academicians. Okay. Excuse me, I was interrupted by a cough. I may have said before, it's acknowledged by many academicians that unless humans achieve significant colonies on other planets, we stand a massive chance of becoming extinct through many circumstances. You see, extinction can be bypassed, but it's all about how long do we want to live as a natural biological encapsulated and creature, right? So we can literally in the future become robots and we become immortalized, because robots survive way longer, So if the person's consciousness was enduring through the biological body, let's say for 100 years, imagine at the end of the 100 years, the person transfers their consciousness into a robotic body, and in some sense, robots are pretty much kind of like solar suits, in the future, possibly. And this is very high sci-fi, but I'm just saying, to me, it's not about even going on the planet. It's just about, it's like the type of relationship human beings have with the planet right now is a toxic relationship. What does that mean, toxic relationship? It means one side of the relationship doesn't care about the destiny of the other side of the relationship. Doesn't care about how their eyes enter the future. So when the human being is selfish, they become toxic. They become toxic to the earth, to the living earth, right? Back in the day, the planet Earth was not only seen as alive, but it was put into the metaphor of a giant turtle, where civilization was on its back. That means some people had flat earth theory, or through the religious narrative, we were the center of the universe. Imagine you're walking, down a mountain, and you're about to get to the bottom of a mountain, and right before you get to the bottom of the mountain, your foot touches the ground, but the ground has a pulse. And for a second, the person's like feeling a pulse, let's say underneath their feet as they're walking down a mountain, right, on a certain part of the land. Then they realize, they put their hand on that ground, and then they realize it's the neck of that giant turtle where civilization is being carried on its back, poetically. Do you see? That's kind of like how we access the living earth, and through a symbiosis of an energetic nature, we function and we go forth in life. That means there's an energy way of having to be content with the moment, and then there's an ideological way where you got to be content. Then there's just everything is now, what can now do, now is being. Only when we have comfortably come to the here and now, we can begin the great work of the future. So from an internally free state, we start walking in the outer realms. That means, imagine if they asked you what's your philosophy of a person, you'd be like preferenceless, bro. Like you believe in preferencelessism, And so let's say you have this preferenceless attitude and you just walk in society and live in society. That means you have no past reference. You don't care for you have no, your inner realms are not wasting energy on judgment, imposing their own judgment onto the outer realms. They're just walking in the outer realms peacefully. And so in this peace, the inner realms neutrally walks, and like a chess game, the world begins making moves first. And the person can choose, in accordance to the internal probabilities of the moment, to choose one of those routes, It's as if we're living a life behind our eyes. That life behind our eyes is defining how we're finding meaning in the life in front of our eyes. Science is a branch of philosophy in the sense that the known is kept by the unknown. So if there's a possibility that the cause of the universe is unknown, no system of knowledge can do any justice. It's just, theatrics until, we realize the void doesn't have quality. Human life is an opportunity when you realize how much emptiness is everywhere, Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Just honorably accompany your moment of being, let your free will become the guide of your spirit. Imagine the person was so, from a New Agean sense, was so enlightened that somebody asked them, "Hey man, do you have spirit guides?" And the person's like, "Buddy, I guide the spirit." It's like that. What that means is pilots means the free will is as divine as anything else. The Buddha, through the Lotus Sutra, realized that we are all enlightened. And at the end of his life, he went into a hysteria, and his disciples are like, "Buddha, what's up? Why are you freaking out before you die?" And Buddha said, "I was wrong. The world is enlightened. That means everything in it is enlightened. That means in an instant, the antenna can bliss out in recognizing that consciousness and existence no longer need to be at war through the dualism of the human personality, but you become blissed out by realizing chaos is chaos, order is order." Excuse me. And they are both scared children. What I mean in ordered beings of now, there are such higher levels of those dimensions that in some sense the future has to be. In some sense, I totally can understand why the future is scary, right? Because it's are the free wills what's going to happen to me? But really, the free will has to find its presence. And if you discover your presence beyond your personality, you attain something in yogic thought they would call Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nirvikalpa Samadhi means the person has been exposed to a level of intelligent experience where the next lifetime they automatically are enlightened. I'm not kidding. Somebody was telling me this in India, in Rishikesh, in an ashram, right? I just want to see a species implement its efficient vision and try to see what its greatest advancement is. That has honor, simply said. That's an honorable idea. And I think that idea can access anyone in anywhere of the world, where they may feel like, there are people who feel their nation understands them. There are people who feel their nation doesn't understand them, right? But then there are people who realize it's one rock in the middle of nowhere. That's one of those incredible holy shit moments of human psychology, where you realize if without others, there is no society. And people, instead of wasting time rioting in streets, we have moved past the era of physical violence. We have to honor Gandhi's voice, and really now we have come to a point where it's like trying to find the most peaceful way to do the most complex thing. That means imagine every classroom in the educational system, the first thing children had to learn was inner peace. If you don't have inner peace, you can't learn. And so imagine there were meditation mats in front of all classrooms, and children who were late, they would just sit there for 30 minutes just in a meditation pose. Imagine, like a Buddha statue there, also being in the classroom. As a sort of guide. So the student is late to the class, sits there still for 30 minutes. In that stillness, if they rushed into class, their biology, everything calms down, and their ears begin taking the steering wheel of the moment. Every day I realize I am dying to live, and I'm living to die. It's so strange when the end of a system, I don't know how to tell you, there's no such thing as thoughts. There is just internal teleportation or an antenna picking up different signals, which appears like a river. So I would explain the imagination like a river to people, to be honest. That's I think, actually, if I was to teach meditation, I'm thinking I would use the river analogy. Because the river has no identity. Heraclitus says, no man can step in the same river twice, and it's not the same man, it's not the same river. If we get to a very advanced state of mind where we realize time didn't exist, existence is time. The wonders of the world are waiting for us. And I find it how fascinating, how many, on one level you think of the body of the civilization serving the physical dimensions of the civilization, of the advanced civilization. It's for how long can a biological being endure in existence? Imagine that was the homework assignment of primary, middle school kids, I think the hardest problems of humanity should be just shared with middle schoolers, That should be an important shift in the educational system. And this life is sometimes the inner realms can see so much. Imagine a person doesn't have a car, they see a car and they want a car, right? And so, let's say a person, they don't have an advanced civilization. They see in their inner realms an advanced civilization, and in the outer realms they want an advanced civilization. I'm like that. Like that's how I'm looking at things, right? And when I want the advanced civilization, on some level, I'm like, oh my God, things can be happening so much more differently. But at the same time, I'm like, there is a reason to why it's at this level in this moment. You know, that means when I talk about piloting, you pilot yourself. You adjust yourself to the world, or the world adjusts you to itself. When the world adjusts you to itself, that's pretty much the guru disciple analogy in Vedanta. You know, and I would say vice versa leads to the pilot. By the way, guys, people can ask like deep questions in the chat section, you know, like real questions that are like in their inner universe, right? Because the idea is the question will become a design, and then everybody in the chat section can share their comment on it. Because it's kind of like 8 minds in a, right now there's 8 viewers, let's say 9 minds in a room. It creates so much more levels of sophistication, adds so much more levels of sophistication to the room than just one mind, right? So there is no way that just a person alone is the greatest idea of the human being, you know? From the beginning of time, ever since we had a mind, human beings have been worshipping everything. We worshipped objects, then certain human beings, certain pilots landed and they slapped like certain advanced communicators landed in the realm and they just slapped like the objects out of our hand. Then, you know, we have until 2021 been in an era of idea worship where I'm like, yo, is the human experience is the human, you know, direct experiential being still functioning under the narrative that it's a character in a story? Like, when will the multidimensionality settle in, right? And the world is like, everywhere there's a problem. In the future, we can even design a society where so many children are playing video games. These children are going to grow up into society and they'll be like, okay, how should I access the society? And imagine every institution creates quests like old school times. You know, that means every initiative on the surface of the planet that is, let's say, holding structure, infrastructure, like every institution should just create this giant list of problems it has to solve, and anyone who can solve the problem will get, let's say, honor points or certain point system. Then every human being can help different dimensions, right? Right now, even when I look at the, you know, the economical sector, it's super efficient, right? So many businessmen, you know, talking, you know, like, you know, they know what they're doing. You know? Honestly, the world can update. If it can update, the past can't be absolute. If the past can't be absolute, our suffering can't be absolute. If the world updates, excuse me, if the world updates, you're a new self. Like, you don't even have the same suffering. Every day you wake up, you're so, like, our past feels different to us. The mind is using language to reflect to itself how it's an unknown, attributeless witness of being. Upon acknowledgement of this unknown attributeless witness of being, man has confronted the void, man has confronted the singular state. Man, right now, we just have to settle into duality and be able to be like, okay, there's chaos and order in the world. What can we do? We can accept it, you know? The moment we accept the world, we have access to its geometry, and then we can use it to strategize. A strategy is pretty much just like coordinating how information connects to other information fields, really. And I feel I've said enough. Just honorably serve your civilization, you know. Whoever you are, wherever you are. I'll tell you, just have this nobility, right? Like back in the day, knights, like the knights of the kingdom in medieval times, you know, their internal realm was as sophisticated as the samurai, as the inner realm of the samurai, like how the samurai held honor. And the samurai honored its own free will, but the knight honored like the kingdom's advancement, right? So you could say knights were like trying to, like, the advanced, I don't know how to say it, but I'm just saying, like, we are all here to do something, right? And we're gonna go on in this life doing many things, but you know, while we're doing many things, we can have this context of, in our decisions, just thinking, all right, what is the most advanced state, where inner realms are peaceful, skillful, definitely healthy, and in some sense, vision is just an uncharted territory where every person is an explorer. Your name is just like your code, barcode of what level of what explorer you are. You know, your eyes, a person's consciousness, their intelligence, is a gift from the gods. You know, when you notice divinity is in some sense being welcomed by natural law. You know, I would encourage many people to look at Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I'm going to read his quotes actually. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is one of the most incredible people where I feel he deserves to be taught in schools like who he was. If I ever had a lecture in university, if I was ever giving a lecture in a university, I don't know if that day will ever find me, but if I was to, I would definitely just write a list of important people in history on the blackboard. Imagine it was a blackboard with chalk. Because really what it is it's the journey of eyes, and knowledge, true knowledge, is really how far human beings have seen. And that's something where the mind challenges the other. You know, there is the invisible other, as in many mystical traditions have talked about, and then there's the visible other. The invisible and the visible. The visible you is conditional. The invisible you is unconditional. The mind cannot die. It could just miss out on expressionism of the highest caliber, of the most advanced state. The body, in some sense, is literally like the atoms. It's like right now as I'm speaking, it's like a strange view on the body would be, an uncommon view on the body would be like as if all my cells, all the cells in my body, they are in some sense like an army, and my mind is the commanding officer, all my memory and ability with the inner realms. And in some sense, the soul is standing as the presence of the whole witness. That means I'm a person who's saying my whole moment of being is my soul. That's how I'm at least touching that idea of the soul. Anyways, I'm going to go into a quote tunnel of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. All right. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he was a yogi that from his guru and from the tradition of the Nam, if I remember correctly, he was a man who introduced the concept of transcendental meditation to the modern world. And he did it so incredibly, where it was as if you saw how he was raised and who he was, like at the end of his life, it's as if he had traveled universally. Anyways, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, happiness radiates like the fragrance from a flower and draws all good things towards you. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, whatever we put our attention on will grow stronger in our life. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, problems will disappear as darkness disappears with the onset of light. Okay, I was looking for a picture. Here, I'll put it in the people can look at the wallpaper of the video. If you take your attention to the glowing forest, you will see that this is who Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is. This is who he was. I mean, who he is, or was. Yeah. He's the... and that's like his guru, the person who in some sense opened his eyes to transcendental meditation. And he comes to the West being this effortless kind of, preacher of another state of mind that man can access. And believe it or not, a lot of celebrities in Western history, they relate to him. For example, I don't know, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, a bunch of other people, Harrison Ford, David Lynch, these people, their lives were inspired by this picture of this person I'm showing to you. And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, I don't know if I'm going to find the exact quote, but he talks about like the levels of consciousness. Hopefully I'll find it here. Anyways, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the philosophy of life is this. Life is not a struggle, not a tension. Life is bliss. It is eternal wisdom, eternal existence. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says life finds its purpose and fulfillment in the expansion of happiness. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the important thing is this: to be able at any moment to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. That means don't, at the moments where the past is dragging you into darkness, it's as if like your future self arrives to pull you back, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says problems or successes, they all are the results of our own actions, karma. The philosophy of action is that no one else is the giver of peace or happiness. One's own karma, one's own actions are responsible to come to bring either happiness or success or whatever. Guys, this is the most important quote. Holy shit, people should graffiti this quote on walls. This idea by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, this idea, I would say, is it's kind of like he's saying because there's a cause and effect relationship, because our free will is causing our where we are in the world to experience the world, because we're in charge, we are the pilot. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is saying only the pilot can pilot the plane properly beyond karmic turbulence. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, excuse me, he says, just think of any negativity that comes at you as a raindrop falling into the ocean of your bliss. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, being happy is of the utmost importance. Success in anything is through happiness. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, the constitution of the universe is total natural law. Natural law we say from the field of science. Will of God we say from the field of religion. It's the same thing. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the highest state is laughter. And some stand-up comedians getting booed on stage probably are like, I don't think so, but Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the self of everyone, the Atma of everyone, the transcendental field of reality of everyone is the same in everyone. Whether the body calls itself an American, German, Indian, or Chinese, it doesn't matter. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says individual potential of life is cosmic potential. Individual is divine deep inside. Transcendental experience awakens that divinity in man. And when you kill a man, you deprive him of that birthright of it. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says you must learn to take life less seriously and to laugh. Yeah, and guys, let me tell you why laughter is an ancient art form. Okay, like it's not easy to truly laugh, right? Because we can't spontaneously, like you can't just laugh out of nowhere. It is when the context of the world changes before the concept does, or the concept changes before the context does. And that's strangely surprising to the human being, and laughter can arise. MMY says the kingdom of heaven is like electricity. You don't see it, it is within you. Master of the universe is every man's potential insight, cosmic potential. When the conscious mind expands to embrace deeper levels of thinking, the thought wave becomes more powerful and results in added energy and intelligence. Yeah, this is where a stream is connecting to the river, where if you actually were able to consciously watch your inner realms and its rhythms and when you can watch the rhythms of your mind. Pretty much you're watching how your mind is happening as an event in the moment, and you are the watcher of the event of your own existence being experienced instantly. So there's like a point where existence and experience are connecting, right? So in going and embracing the deeper levels, there is a witness of simultaneity. You know, I would say it's like watchfulness of the simultaneous possibilities. You know, that kind of state. You know, imagine we give titles to states of mind. You know, and we create legends. Like there's a state of mind that a person can get into where they, in some sense, become the perfect runner or something. You know, we can create a sort of ethos behind, you know, the macro value of our micro movements. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says there is one unity, unified wholeness, total natural law in the transcendental unified consciousness. You know what that means? That means Maharishi's like in the ocean, and like, you know, somehow the ocean has found a way to talk to, or let's say a drop that has been to the ocean, you know, is talking to a drop, and they're both drops are about to enter a river, you know? And so one drop is like, yeah man, I've been to the ocean, you're pretty much everything. You know, and the one drop is like, yo, how is that possible? And the moment they go into the river, the possibility is understood. The moment we can watch our minds, we have an ability to use it. The moment we honestly use it. Let me tell you why in the outer realms, I don't care really if people are honest or dishonest. I mean, I care. But in the inner realms, you have to be honest. Because if you are not, there is the possibility of a sort of reversion back to fear. Right? So if the person is dishonest when it comes to their mind, that means you have a person, you should stop any sort of, when it comes to really trying to study and wonder and explore the inner realms, the person has to completely detach for a moment, like put the whole story of who they are put the character in the story of their life on pause, and just for a moment recognize, all right, it's a relationship with the unknown that instantly any person can have. You know, it's like the unknown welcomes truth, but the unknown, you know, potentially may reject those who in some sense are too afraid to see the world change before they do. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says modern psychology has pointed to the need of educating people to use a much larger portion of the mind. That's what's up, guys. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi continues. He says transcendental meditation fulfills this need and it can be taught very easily. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says what we have done, the result of that comes to us whenever it comes. Either today, tomorrow, 100 years later, 100 lives later, whatever. And so it's our own karma. That is why that philosophy in every religion, killing is a sin. Killing is sin in every religion. Okay, that's political. Yeah, of course, because it took us 4.5 billion years to evolve from a secular perspective, and from a theological perspective, every person that has a soul that is hurt is like someone hurting God. It's the worst disbelief. That means all those religious people who are like believing God, if you are violent, it is the biggest disbelief, because you are attacking something that the soul, which is God, within the man is in. Right? So immediately from a theological standpoint, peace is the only route. In the secular standpoint, we need peace to bring in the advance and to have control, right? We don't have to necessarily have a, flashy story. For me, I think the advanced civilization is the best narrative, what I know. But of course, this is my podcast, so I'm bound to say things like this. Anyways, let's see one last quote. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, behavior arises from the level of one's consciousness. I'm going to read one more, actually. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, it's as if we live in a house which has a vast treasury in one of its rooms, only we've forgotten about it. So instead of living a life of royalty, we go about in poverty. And he's talking about inner realm royalty. I've pointed to this in certain talks, but what it is that you begin having an honor for the kingdom of how far your free will has access to move in the inner realms. So you pretty much begin honoring yourself as if, oh my God, am I existing for the first time ever in every new moment I enter? You know, like it's like that level of like fascination, you know, of like the mysterious rooms or dimensions beyond the veil of the senses. Anyways, guys, to end this off, even if we did everything we could just to get to see an advanced civilization, that would be our, you know, ultimata argument enough, you know, a sort of ultimate argument, you know, just to see what it would be worth it, you know, to see how advanced the species can be, and it's so advanced that it has become an ally of nature, not an enemy, right? So the moment we can accept an unknown dimension to our intelligence, the whole planet's like, oh my God, this person woke up. They realize the unknown is moving. You see, that is how one becomes grateful of their eyes, because your eyes bring you to the world that can be engaged. The conscious waking state is a very, I would say, an advanced multidimensional technology. Every person alive right now, you're like, poetically, you're a very sophisticated multidimensional being. But in regards to how you use your free will and pilot his attention in the space-time continuum, if you're wise, you care for, try to create a backup system that in some sense helps humanity's survival. Because the story of our lives requires a body to it, you know. And in order to have a body, we have to care for the species. There's no greater honor. Thanks for listening, guys. Namaste.